All right. In case you stumbled upon this blog post posted under the Google Cloud Communities medium, you may be wondering, okay, this sounds great in theory, but how does it actually work? How do I sort of adapt this multi-agent architecture, this orchestrator worker pattern to UI components? How do we sort of reimagine human-computer interaction? Well, that's what's really fascinating about what I'm calling agentic component recognition, because using the same thought process with how multi-agent systems work, you can actually sort of use that to sort of help streamline how agents, how interfaces are presented to your end user, and it's nothing new. Recommendation systems have been doing this in a way in a while, but I make a distinction between recommendation systems and generative UI, in that where recommendation systems sort of use data to sort of personalize your interface. Say, for example, when you go to Netflix, your Netflix feed might be different from mine, and that's just a recommendation system. A generative UI refers to user interfaces that are dynamically created and adapted in real time by AI. Doesn't have to be, but normally by AI these days, based on my behavior or my context that I provided or my intent, right? And this is in contrast to static predefined layouts, right? Even with the recommendation systems, believe it or not, even though you might be ingesting a Rexis API or model API endpoint, the interfaces are still static in a sense. So I'll sort of I'll jump right into the demo. But then why did I pick 80K? It seems like, a howitzer when a pea shooter could actually do the trick. Well, there's a good 20 or so month history behind this demo, where I've used traditional sort of rule-based approaches. I've used small agents from Hugging Face. I've basically used every framework that has come out here. So this is sort of an evolution, of sort of pushing the limits of what can be. And then I have some sort of benchmarks that I'll be publishing soon as to, including cost, right? Just because you can doesn't always mean you should. And I'll try to be as pragmatic as possible. So here what you're going to see is our root agent and our sub agents working together to deliver something personalized back to the end user. I'm using 80K in this, and 80K was released at Google Next earlier in 2025, in order to allow you to sort of deliver rich multi-agent solutions. It's very, very similar in architecture to offerings by Microsoft, and Crew AI, and some of these sort of non no code, low code, no code type solutions. So it's actually gives you a lot more flexibility to sort of do some magic. And at the very base of it, you always want to keep your orchestrator very simple. And so I'll sort of, and then of course your workers are the ones who are just sort of making tool calls. What you saw earlier was workers in the middle and a bevy of tools available to each one of those workers. All right, let's jump right into it. First, I'm going to naturally show you, okay, I've already done a search for this one, so I'm just going to try it again just so that you sort of see how it runs. It's actually pretty cool. So let's say I don't want to use my, Snowflake or Tableau implementation at work to deliver simple data. So in natural language, or to display simple insights. So in natural language, I might search for a query like this, which would just go back to my data lake or what Snowflake or wherever things are. I happen to be using something called Tremor, which is a React library that works with Next.js, but theoretically you can use anything you want. So what happened here is, let's sort of look at the events that just happened. The end user made a request that was passed on to the orchestrator passed on to the right agent. In this case, there are a couple agents, but it chose to ask the chart generation agent. Chart generation agent uses a smaller model to then make a tool call or a function call or talk to another agent if you really wanted to get fancy to do that. So that's what's happening there. This right here you see here is the end result. So exactly, the tool response came in, and that was the right formatting for this. So technically, if I were to pull up, first let's check Postman. I also have, if you remember in this image, I should have mentioned ADK comes with different interfaces to interact with. You can either you do an ADK run within the CLI, and you can sort of interact with it. I actually like the web UI, but naturally, just for extensibility, you might want to sort of serve an endpoint. In production, Google Vertex or GCP gives you agent engine that you can sort of deploy to. It also gives you the flexibility of Google Cloud Run to deploy to. Or what I would personally do is just, you know, deploy to a container of some sorts, just because I may not want to be locked into Agent Engine or Cloud Run, but whatever floats your boat. Or you can just sort of spin up your own Fast API or Flask instance, and that sort of communicates with Agent. I should also mention that I am running ADK, the latest version of ADK, which came with some good developer experience hygiene. And so, yeah. So yeah, it just sort of spits back our Tremor, basically JSON as a response. This was well, the system instruction is like really verbose. And just for that, so we'll talk about, just because you can doesn't mean you should at a later date. So those were the events. Call got transferred to the right person, and then we got our results. We use state to manage certain things. Often with agents, you might run into status 429 issues where when you're trying, when you're trying to avoid sort of these infinite loops, because that's all an agent is, and the agent is just a while loop at the end of the day. It's understand reasoning through the user's intent. It is deciding when to call a tool or what tool to call. It is then deciding if the results from that tool call has satisfied an end user's goal, and then break, right? But sometimes you can sort of imagine. So it's up to you, unfortunately, or fortunately. Google, in this instance, gives you the flexibility to implement your own stateful logic that monitors external API responses, and then uses those primitives to break the loop, right? And so that's if that's your bag. I tend to use like a circuit breaker pattern, which I can get into when we look at the code here in a little bit. But you could theoretically want to just sort of do something like a decorator that wraps the entire agent function call, the agent function making that API call to catch any 429s that are coming. So that's sort of just a design decision that you'd have to make on your own. That doesn't come out of the box. Okay. All right. So I mentioned, yes, you have an API, right? Because that's the other way to interface with ADK. So what can you do with an API? So you can, let's ask it for sales trends for Q4. That should return like a line chart or a bar chart. So we're going to sort of try that here. I'm going to basically copy this, right? So I'm going to copy this query. And we're going to go into this interface that I vibe coded. That's actually kind of fun. It's the first time I've actually just one-shot vibe coded an interface that I actually like. But we're going to do that same query. And I see a bug, but it's actually sort of returning the data. There are three data points over here. I don't see the line chart here. So I'm going to ask it. The lovely part about generative UI is, again, it's hyper personalized to you. So say, for example, if I wanted to see this as a tabular format, just show me the data so I can just copy this into Excel and do whatever I need. That's doesn't have to go through several clicks and all that stuff and sort of futzing through user interfaces. You just basically ask it, show me this as a bar chart. So imagine like if you have accessibility needs, this would actually call an accessibility agent because I've actually sort of given it, and this is the same data, right? And so you can imagine, you see how flexible this is. If this was something that I could say, hey, show me, a kurtosis or a bar chart or an area chart, whatever, as long as it was compatible with the data, you have an orchestrator that is, in my case, running Gemini 2.5 Pro. So it's a beefy model. And then you've got our workers that are using flash models, right? Like that, they don't have to be that smart. And so you've got levels of complexity there, which again we'll talk about it later. But you see where this can be really powerful, right? Because if I were to ask something like, uh, show me a business intelligence dashboard. Let's see what it'll do. I've not done this yet. Dashboard with the data that I have today. Please don't break. Please don't break. I'm very curious if it would work. It's taking some time. It did. Oh, there it is. So it actually got us. Oh, and another thing I didn't do is this is a multi-agent system. I've only been showing you the chart agent. So the chart agent actually is actually pretty cool because, it still sort of returned the chart agent data here, but then it also showed another agent that I was yet to introduce called our um, geospatial agent, right? So it's all working in concert with each other, which makes this kind of cool. So imagine now you can have like a tool registry of sorts within your enterprise and sub agents that have agent cards or whatever, and now you can have sort of A2A, again leveling additional complexity to it. This just blows my mind. By the way, for everything that it does, it has code behind it. Like, so I'm just not trying to show you something that is just sort of static. These are generated on the fly, which is very, very awesome. All right, cool. What do we do next? By the way, just a break. You like this kind of content? Follow me for more. I don't post often, but when I do post, I post quality stuff like this. If you want to learn this stuff, I've created a whole Notebook LM instance for you. It's shareable, it's public. You can ask it for stuff like, how do I get started with ADK? And at least with the context of using ADK for generative UI, you have everything here. If you don't want that and you want to, say, play around with generative UI and ADK in a Jupyter notebook, I've created that for you as well, so on and so forth. So yeah, I've put in a lot of work just to spread my goal of making agentic component recognition a thing. So let's look at some code. Hopefully you guys don't judge me as I show you my code. I've used, quick story, I used, let's close all. I haven't committed my changes yet. Anyway, so I happen to sort of write most of this code in an artisan way, at least using a demo example from Google's GitHub repo. And then I used that. Basically, I'm explaining my workflow. I talked to the Gemini CLI and I said, hey, look at this implementation. Now write yourself your rules to sort of implement and then insert goal, right? So my goal is to build this generative UI thing. Of course, I've been doing this for 2, 3 years. And so I had a lot of examples. So my rules were very verbose. I gave it endpoints, so this open API, API or Swagger sort of spec for it to follow, which actually contracted the amount of work that I needed to do by a lot, right? Okay, enough yapping. Let's look at that circuit breaker pattern thing that I was talking about before. Oh, look. When I asked it to sort of do some stuff, it changed my model. This was supposed to be pro, so that's gone. Oh, look at that. It just crashed. Did y'all see that? My IDE just crashed. That was crazy. So this is the wrong model, but nothing is broken yet, so I'll just keep it the same. Normally, my orchestrator, I try to make that smart, and I try to make my workers use less tokens. Less smart, like flash models are good enough for it, or SLMs are good enough for those, at least for my use case. What am I trying to show here? Oh, I guess the simplicity. The simplicity of the implementation for the root agent. It has to be super simple. Don't have it calling tools directly. It just has to coordinate. And so you sort of see this example where I have, for sales trends, it's sort of specific to my use case. So sales trends, line charts with trend analysis. I feel, okay, I was just about to launch into a whole opinion about how you build agents. Agents can be ephemeral. And so you can just sort of build special purpose agents just to get a job done and delete themselves. And that's where I want to get at some point. Anyway, that's for another day. All right, so let's look at one of our sub agents, right? Geospatial agent. I hope I gave you, I don't think I gave you like a real, example of that. So let me go back to this. Show California performance. And I tend to want to check with our ADK directly before I sort of hit my endpoint. It depends on what I'm trying to do. And so we'll see what it comes back with. And as it's doing that, let's go back to, yeah, so these are essentially location configuration with ideally intelligent zoom, so it can sort of just zoom into California or zoom into a region that has data depending on your intent, right? So I give it a couple examples here. And then let's see, you saw the dashboard layout. So I gave it a skeleton, right? I gave it, I gave it basically just like a scaffold for it to then trigger this agent to sort of create a complex multi-component layout like you saw before. This thing is still going. I think it's going to fail. It's interesting. Let's try it again. Oh, that's right. Our server died when cursor crashed. Anyway, so doesn't matter. You see the vibes anyway. I'll keep going. I won't try to restart the server. But anyway, if you wanted to just bump all this and just sort of use the command line, it's just ADK run, and that will do the trick as well. I have some patterns that I've learned is that I wanted to use Flask to instantiate my ADK server. So in my GitHub repo, so look out for that and how I did it. It's sort of inheriting from the ADK runners class. And so you import the runner, you you your properties are sort of the root your agent, your application name, basic stuff, and then I'm enabling telemetry so that we probably should start the terminal again. This is going to take some time. Server.py. Created like a little harness to make sure that our server sort of spins up a bunch of other things. So there's an issue here. I'm not going to attempt to debug that. I probably should do a live sort of coding kind of thing. I always enjoy those when other people do it. Anyway, I hope this has been meandering yet fun, just to sort of see the innards of agentic component recognition. I really hope that sticks, and how you can essentially supplant expensive dashboards that no one ends up using because they're just sort of made for everyone versus a generative AI system that is personalized to your needs. Of course, one thing I've not mentioned is entitlements, which is very important. I've not mentioned anything about attribute-based access control or RBAC, role-based access control, or any identity-related governance that you need to think about. That still matters. I did not talk about session state. I did not talk about evaluations and error analysis. Still important, but all of that information is in the resources that I provide you, and I don't want to make this video any longer. It's been going long enough as it is. So I'm going to end it here. Thank you for your time.